Today I'm going to be talking about the reasons why you should, the reasons why you shouldn't, and reasons you could consider getting an HP Tuners platform, me specifically owning an MPVI3 device. And this is a 2015 F150 3.5 liter. It's an Ecoboost. It's got turbos, right? And it is a lot of fun to tune. But today we're going to be going over kind of if this is more of your thing or not. Is it something you're going to have fun doing, or is it just going to frustrate you? And knowing your limits and the limits of your vehicle. First thing first, what is an MPVI3? Not only is it hard to say, but it gives you access to such charts like this. It's a chart of maximum IPC manifold air pressure that is allowed under the conditions by the IPC controls, however they decide to control that. So on the left side you have load, and since it's a boosted application, you get loads over 100%. And then you have engine RPM. So these are values in PSI, meaning that at 180% load at 6,000 RPM, the engine is letting 60 PSI. And that's a value that realistically with the turbos, you'll never see unless you get bigger turbos. And there's a whole discussion to have for that, but this isn't the video for that. So, how do you prevent yourself from getting one of these and hopefully only one of these and not both of these situations? So, the right-hand side of the truck bursting into flames, that's a little unrealistic for an HP Tuners platform. You have to be honestly talented to make your truck do that. Or just turn off the cooling fans and, yeah. But the main thing you're going to see a lot in the first early days of your tuning is that wrench icon right there. And that's, ironically, that's for a 10-speed truck. I have a 6-speed, and it's arguably the better transmission for safety and longevity. 10 speeds, if you have a 10-speed, don't feel bad. I'm not shaming you. 10 speeds are very hard to beat when it comes to performance and efficiency. But that C manual and your check engine light are both going to come on many times when you're tuning this truck, if you're tuning it right. Now, you can immediately go to all those IPC values like the one I showed you and just max them out, or just zero them out entirely and cancel them out. But you're losing a lot of the safety that is naturally inherent into the truck's software that is really nice to have whenever something actually does fail, which is more likely if you are increasing the performance of your vehicle. So, how do we avoid this? So that when you're driving and nothing actually breaks, it's just your truck trying to prevent something from breaking. You don't want to be in limp mode on the highway. That's not fun. And if you don't have your tablet, you could need a tow. You probably won't. But how do you avoid this icon at the same time from being a real legitimate concern that you actually broke something in your truck? So, steps before use. Research. When I got my tuner, I was very careful at first because I'm tuning my daily driver, right? Most people, when they're tuning a vehicle, are going to be tuning their daily driver, especially when it comes to an F150. Certain people have smaller secondary cars. That is great. I would recommend you do that if you have the ability, but not everybody has the ability, right? So, know your car. This particular video pertains to F150s because that is what I have experience in. And I am not a professional tuner, in case that has not been made clear. So what is this? On the top of your F150, on the left-hand side of your intake manifold, this is your boost controller. And the reason I put this picture up here is I have seen countless, including my own truck, countless pictures and complaints about these hoses snapping every time somebody tries to do a intercooler replacement, every time you have to take the charge pipes off, every time you have to take the manifold off, or especially if you're doing like a cam gear replacement, like the phaser replacement or a timing chain, you have to take these valve covers off, and every single time people try to take these on and off, these snap. So this particular line, you can replace these with those ordinary vacuum lines, because that's what's already on the boost controller itself. It's just a vacuum line. It's just made to be plastic so that it doesn't sit on the valve cover, which mine are aluminum because you're going to want aluminum valve covers if you have to take them off because they're only really a one-time use. But anyhow, that's the particular reason I show that picture. That is a very important component of your car, pertaining to F-150s and 3.5 liters and Fords. If you don't know what this is, you shouldn't tune your vehicle. So, that's knowing your car. Know your drivetrain. So, if you have a 5 liter, That's a completely different tuning process than if you have a 3.5 liter. If you have an LS6, an LS7, or an LP Max, an LP5 diesel, those are completely different platforms. You cannot take advice from anyone whose engine is a different fuel, has different compression ratios, is boosted or non-boosted. You should only be trying to get advice from something as close to your vehicle as possible. That includes your transmission. So obviously, if you have a manual and an automatic, that is totally different. But what's extremely different about F-150s to say like Audi cars, especially like if you have an Audi Q5, Q3, you can't tune those with HP tuners, but let's say that you're getting advice from somebody that has tuned an Audi vehicle. The transmission, number one, it's an 8-speed, not a 6-speed. That's not a huge difference, but some cases that can be. The torque converter is wildly different in this vehicle. Not only is this vehicle designed to tow, but this vehicle has very small dual turbos versus Audis have single turbos in their inline engines. So that's very important to know. If you have a loose converter, you can get more exhaust faster, aka spin your turbos faster off of the line, versus an Audi takes a good second, maybe 3/4 of a second before it actually gives you any power of any kind. And that's totally different when you're trying to tune stuff in, and that applies to everything airflow related. The last thing is, this is a very difficult and a very complicated and time-intense process to fully understand your vehicle enough to actually get real, measurable, and felt horsepower and torque gains. Now, you can increase every single table by 30% and you can enjoy the ride, but you're going to be putting at risk some pretty major components that you really shouldn't put. And it's much cheaper just to get a $450, 5-star tune or something like that than it is to get a new pair of turbos and exhaust manifolds because you didn't understand what an EGT was. So, this is very important, and I never see anybody do it. So, people always will increase the spark, increase the octane, which you increase the octane if you can. So, if you're tuning for the first time, tune down, not up. What does that mean? So, if you have controls to boost that you're trying to figure out, as long as you know they're not inverses, if you know how adjusting changes it, always prefer to tune down first. If you're tuning up, you could be causing pre-detonation. Now, most vehicles, like Fords included, and I don't know Chevys, but I would imagine they're the same way, right? They will automatically, unless you've deleted that beforehand, which I would not, they automatically retard spark and have throttle closure events and all sorts of safeties built in. This is why you should not get rid of those safeties right off the bat, or really at all. And that will prevent the engine from pre-detonation or knock. The second step is always be wise. If you don't know what you're changing, either don't change it at all or barely change it at all. If you're changing a spark table and you notice that your injector duty cycle, no matter what you can do, never goes past, say, like my vehicles, I've never seen it go past 37%, that might be a legitimate injector limit. And it might not get to 100% because the injector isn't firing or pushing fuel out in the engine 100% of the time because that cylinder isn't capable of taking fuel when it's on the exhaust stroke and the combustion stroke, right? So, and also understand other things. When you're injecting fuel, this is something I've seen many times in the forums platform, which is another topic I have coming soon, where people will tell you to retard and advance your injection window, which is true, but they retard the window to all the way after combustion has started happening, and they're like, well, there's nothing really bad that can happen from that. That's totally false. The whole concept of an internal combustion engine is that you get a quick combustion that pushes the cylinder down, and then it's clear. There's no more fire inside the cylinder. But if you're injecting fuel after the exhaust valve is opened, you're creating fire, not combustion. This is not some explosive event. It's deflagration or it's fire, and that fire in this aluminum block with sleeves in it, whatever cast pistons, I don't know what car you might be having, this could be causing serious hot spots in the engine, and it could completely destroy your block and your pistons and your rings. That is just not a smart thing to do, especially on a vehicle like mine that has aluminum heads. So Record the correct channels is also very, very important. Now, what you'll notice on this, the channels that I'm pertaining to is on this white list over on this side. So we also have these channels. These are very important, but really the only thing I changed with mine is I got my injector duty cycle up and I got my intake cam data on, because that is very important. 2 factors to understand with airflow models and stuff like that. So it's kind of useful, to have your torque converter. That's your TCC speed ratio. That's kind of useful. Your fuel pump demanded duty cycle, DC. That's kind of useful. Your vehicle speed, your engine coolant temp, your intake air temp, very useful stuff to know. And because of how HP Tuners works, if you try to get rid of those, they'll disappear on the dials, right? Because you have to record it in the channels to get it on either the graph or the dials. Your inferred octane. For my particular vehicle, that's really helpful because that lets me know, hey, am I going to get some knock retarding because of low octane? My vehicle does not have an octane sensor, but these computers detect when soft knock starts happening, and they will know based off of that what the octane is up to 98 octane. So I could be running 150 octane race gas or whatever. It would know. That's the highest it can read, and it will not advance the spark based off of anything higher than 98 octane, right? Air load, not super important. Really, you can record that. I record that for this session for a specific reason that's not important in this video. Obviously, this is a joke. Air filter life, that I'm not even sure how the computer measures that, but it is in no meaning, way, shape, or form useful. Knock correction, maybe useful if you're specifically looking at spark, not really useful in this particular situation. Exhaust map, actually super useful. And it would be helpful. You can have unit conversions if you know unit conversions, but these aren't the same units, so that number does not directly translate. But I believe, and I would love to be proven wrong if I am wrong with anything I say, don't get me wrong, but I believe that if your exhaust pressure, your back pressure in your exhaust pertaining to your turbo applications reaches above twice the same pressure as the manifold pressure, the boost pressure, the actual pressure that the engine valves see, you have run out of turbo, because the back housing of the turbo and the exhaust is not capable of flowing more, and you're running out of turbo. So if you see stuff like that, you should probably back off, because you're probably overspeeding the living hell out of your turbo. So all your angle, your throttle angle sources, your torque sources, those are going to be things that you really want to see, and you would probably want to organize them together too. I purposely made this terrible. It's going to be hard to read at a first glance, especially if I would not look at this while you're driving unless you're in a track that no one else is on. I just overall read your data after you're driving too. That's a whole nother thing. So mass fraction can be useful. In this situation, it's not, because I don't have enough of the other tables. Turbo overboost can be useful. It's really not in this situation either. Manifold charge temp is something you should have, but you should also know the tables that pertain to that, because the tables will adjust how much airflow is allowed through the turbo, how much load is allowed in the engine. It's a scalar, like a multiplier of 1, or less than 1 or more than 1, depending on that temperature. As the temperature gets higher, the turbos have to work harder to get the same density, right? And then your desired brake torque, your desired engine torque, and those numbers are all going to be different. And there's other numbers that it would be nice to know. I don't think you can get like the turbine in the torque converter turbine torque would be really nice to have, but I think for now that's just something you have to figure out and calculate. And then of course all your throttle angles, positions and stuff like that, so you know what you are doing as a driver. And that throttle position sensor in green on the graph is not what I am doing in the truck. That is what the truck is doing in response to what I'm doing to the truck. So this is why limits are pretty important. And this is not from something this is breaking. So this is something I will always stress. Every single vehicle, first of all vehicles are junk. It's the person that owns the vehicle that makes it less junk. They're always going to break. It's just a matter of when, right? So what is the weak link of your vehicle? That is something you need to know before you try to find out. And you can try to find out, but if that's your daily driver, you're gonna end up needing one of two things, and that's either a tow truck or Jesus, and we try to avoid those kind of situations here. So, what is your limit? What is your limit with a tuner? What is your limit with a car? What is your limit with ability to control your vehicle? What is your suspension limits of your vehicle? There are so many different limits you're going to run into, and a lot of them, once you go past that limit, you see a very rapid increase in wear of certain components without a really big increase of performance. So you may double how much torque your engine makes, but your turbo is only going to last a week and your tires can't handle it, and so you actually might be going slower in a quarter mile because your 60-foot sucks because you're just roasting your tires. And of course you can tune that out, but that's another subject entirely. So why are limits? Well, here's a perfect example. I have a slightly modified stock limit on this particular setup. So you can see that my camshaft in an HP Tuners, negative means advanced because it's happening before 0. So it's negative. So the intake cam is fully advanced. That means the valve is open for the longest possible time. That's a good thing at 3,000 RPM. That means the engine is breathing all the air it can. My variable valve train schedule is set at best fuel economy, and that's great because I'm only, at this graph you can't see it, but I'm only at about 47-50% throttle, I believe. And if you look at my boost curve in the pass graph, you see how it dips down and then it goes back up, and so does the throttle position sensor in green. So the truck is not running predictably, it's not running smoothly, but with the limiters on, both of those things are almost exactly flat. And that pertains to the torque too. So with this graph, when you're driving that vehicle, it's going to kind of stutter and then go faster than you want and then slower than you want. And you're almost entirely dependent on the boost control system to actually give you the torque you're requesting. Versus this system just gives you the torque you're requesting. It just won't be able to give you the same torque. But this limit exists for drivability, for fuel economy, and reliability. And those are very important things. So the most useful information when you're tuning, time after time, is the thing you haven't learned yet. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you through the hard way. Like hopefully you don't figure out that after you reach 25 pounds of boost, you realize that your cylinder 2 decides to disconnect from its Bluetooth connection to the engine, or start a Bluetooth connection to the engine. However, a lot of this stuff seems complicated. So this is just spark tables. Most of these you probably won't ever end up changing. A lot of things you shouldn't ever change on this table, but that is a whole nother topic. But the point is, this looks complicated, and each one of these has a graph like the ones I showed you on the second slide. They're going to be, 25, sometimes 40 tile tables, and all of them matter. And the most important ones here are the borderline, but that's getting into it too deep. But you can see there's a lot of different sections, and each section has its own different category. So the reason that this matters, let's say you didn't know that your turbos are airflow limited because you're not familiar with boosted applications. So your turbos, especially like the ones in my truck that I believe are 30 millimeter exhaust and 70 millimeter intake side, the compressor is a 70 millimeter compressor, I'm going to run out of back housing long before I run out of compressor. But I still will run out of compressor, and I still do. I just don't fully run out of compressor. So at 42 pounds of air a minute, we'll be safe, or we'll say 46 pounds of air a minute, I'm going to be seeing an increase in charge air temps because my compressor's less efficient at 46 pounds of air a minute than it is at 30. Because it was never designed to go up to 46 pounds of air a minute. It still can, but that was never the intent. So you can either be slightly intelligent and either never allow that to happen in the first place and just leave it alone, or you can get an increased volume intercooler, which can help those charge temps come down, or you could solve the issue where it is and just get Raptor turbos or bigger turbos, but you shouldn't do that if you don't know how to tune, or have someone else tune that for you. But recognize that unless you're tuning those turbos to run way slower than the stock turbos, you're going to be pushing your valve train and your heads a lot harder than you probably want to. So the other thing I see a lot of people on HP tuners do, and it's with relation to information they don't know, is they run ethanol. I run ethanol, but I run ethanol for a different reason than they do. So a lot of people run some E85. Now, the injectors in my F150 are 37-pound injectors. They do not allow me to run 100% ethanol at stock horsepower rating. They'll actually run about 320 horsepower maximum before I'm running out of injectors. So I run 35% ethanol. And there's a reason I'm so specific. I just found that works best with my application. I run 35% ethanol in my truck, so that means I have to go to specific gas stations that have E85. It is a little annoying, but there's a very big reason I do that. So stock power in my truck and stock torque is 365 horsepower and 420 foot-pounds of torque. Now, I get way higher than that. I have not dynoed my vehicle, but I've done some basic acceleration, and I know the weight of my truck, so I know the mass, so you could figure it out. On a 0 to 60 run, I have on average about 405 horsepower. So that's a lot higher than stock, meaning my peak horsepower is probably around 415, 425 to be safe. And the reason I'm able to get that much horsepower without changing any of my turbo back pressure graphs is because I'm running 30% ethanol. Not only does ethanol have a higher octane rating, normal pump gas is 87 octane and E85 is 105, but I'm running 89 octane fuel with 105 octane ethanol at 35%. So my actual octane rating is about 95.3. And then to be safe, when I was doing this for the first time, I added some octane boosters. So I was running really like 125 octane fuel. But now I'm just running like 102. And so the benefit of that is you can do more compression because the higher the octane is, the lower the risk is of knock, because higher octane fuels will have a higher auto detonation point, meaning that you can either advance the spark or increase the pressure or advance the intake cam, make the valves open earlier. Basically, you can make more torque. You can squeeze more into the cylinder before you have detonation, before you want it. So the second, and in my opinion, most important reason that these trucks and these engines respond to ethanol super well is 30% ethanol. Well, what's different about ethanol? Not only does it have a cooling factor, that's kind of cool, but the main reason is that ethanol, full E85 ethanol, has a air-to-fuel ratio of 8.8-ish pounds of air per pound of fuel, and normal pump gas has an air-to-fuel ratio of 14.08 because it has some ethanol in it to 1, meaning you need 14 pounds of air for 1 pound of fuel. And if I'm running 35% ethanol, I need like 12.78 pounds of air per pound of fuel. So I need less air for the same unit of horsepower. So that is good for some reasons and bad for some reasons. The first reason it's bad, EGTs are higher. So my exhaust gas temperatures are going to be higher, and that's bad for certain components. Now, I have different exhaust manifolds and new turbos, so I don't particularly have to worry about that. But stock manifolds can't handle higher. They can't even handle the exhaust gas temperatures that are stock. They barely can. They only last like 100,000 miles. But get BD diesel, saves you a lot of trouble. The big proponent of that is in a boosted application, especially like the F150 3.5 liter that has limits of the turbo and how much air the turbo can supply and airflow. If I have the same horsepower at less turbo airflow, then I don't need to work the turbo as hard to make more horsepower. Or if you want to look at it differently, I need to work the turbo less to make the same horsepower. So that gives us to another issue, is why am I not running 45% ethanol? Wouldn't that be better? Well, yes, but no. So it would seem better because I would have it even lesser at like 11.3 air-to-fuel ratio, and I should be able to make more horsepower. And that's true up to a point, because as I said earlier, the compressor is not the main limiting factor of my truck. I'm merely increasing the efficiency and the lower torque range of my compressor by not using it as much. So the main limit on my vehicle that limits horsepower, not torque, but horsepower, is the back housing of my turbo. So in the same way, if you're sitting in a bathtub and you decide to turn the water on as you're draining it, if there's more water entering the bathtub than there's draining, you're going to overfill the bathtub even though you're draining it. So if there's more exhaust gas coming out of the engine, then there is possible exhaust that can flow through the small enumerator of the exhaust side of the turbo. Then you just get a lot of pressure because air is compressible. And up to a point, you only get more pressure. And pressure is not good for gaskets, and also it's not good for heat. You will wear your turbos down fast doing it that way. So you can either get a bigger turbo or run more pump gas, because pump gas, having a much leaner mixture required, the same lambda, because that's how lambda works, but since it's closer to 14 than it is 8 for pure E85, it makes less exhaust. So E85 makes more exhaust. That's good for low range torque because turbos depend on exhaust to turn. If I decided to run my truck back on fully stock, pump gas and everything, flashed it and everything, I would get a normal response like you're probably used to. However, if I run a 35% ethanol and I have tuned several of my spark tables and turbo tables for throttle response, and I just step on it, those turbos spool like a supercharger. It is near instantaneous boost because down low, my truck is producing like 10% more exhaust than is stock. That turbine will grab that exhaust and whip that compressor around really fast. And that does mean I've had to tune the wastegates at lower RPMs so that it doesn't boost spike. Long story short, there's a lot of things that seem obvious that are not, and there's a lot of things that people say is obvious that is not. The biggest thing I will say, do not depend on HP Tuners forums. It is a great place to get basic information, but the second, like ChatGPT, the second you start asking it for really specific information, the quality of your information starts dropping off pretty rapidly. Most people don't care to check either what platform you're tuning versus what platform they're tuning. Even if it is the same platform, they'll tell you to turn off those limits, crank up that injector window, injector duty cycle window, and turn all the exhaust temperature inverses to infinity so that it never limits you. And that's great. But most people want their truck to run for longer than 60,000 miles. So be smart with how you do it. And I'm going to make a few more videos coming out soon. Hopefully, I will be talking about specific systems and any questions that might pop up. Not being my first video, there probably won't be any comments. But I'll be giving specific overlying systems, particularly to the airflow side of the system. And then also kind of what you should expect to have to work on your F-150 at certain mileages. I think that could be pretty beneficial for most people because that's going to be the most important factor as well with how you're tuning your vehicles. How many miles are on it, man? Have you replaced the turbos after 120,000 miles? Have you replaced the manifolds, the timing chain? I mean, have you checked your spark plugs? I have a 160-degree thermostat in the coolant line because I want my engine to run cooler because that helps me for other reasons. That hurts gas mileage, but nobody drives a truck for gas mileage. And it gets like 19.7 anyways with 33% ethanol because I'm able to run leaner and run more spark at low RPM settings. Everything has a consequence. There's no such thing as a free lunch when it comes to anything in the world. That includes tuning. So you're going to lose something by gaining something and vice versa. But yeah, I got some new videos that might be coming out next week. And tell me what you want to see if you are commenting. But yeah, I'm going to be going over the systems, and this is not a tuning-only channel. I'm going to be going over some things with firearms and history, but as of right now, I'm just going to try to address some issues I see in the HP Tuners world, and the forums, and the community. This has been fun. Don't blow up your engine, and try to keep yourself out of situations where you need a tow truck and Jesus, because that's just not very fun.